You know, when you think of Satan, a really specific image probably pops into your head, right? Horns, a pitchfork, the ultimate personification of evil. He is, without a doubt, one of the most powerful and recognizable figures in our culture. But have you ever really stopped and asked yourself, where did that character actually come from?
Okay, let's really get into this because the answer is so much more surprising and honestly so much more human than you'd probably guess. This isn't just a story about religion, it's a story about us.
Just look at this for a second, because this really shows the massive shift we're talking about. In the Hebrew Bible, what Christians call the Old Testament, Satan isn't even really a name. It's like a job title. It just means the adversary. He's basically a heavenly prosecutor, part of God's divine counsel. But then you fast forward to the New Testament Gospels, and boom, he's suddenly the Prince of Darkness, God's #1 cosmic enemy. So what on earth happened in between?
That crazy evolution, that's the central mystery we are going to unpack today. How does a minor angelic official get promoted to the king of all evil? Well, the answer, it turns out, might not be hiding in ancient theology. It might be found in history and sociology. The figure of Satan wasn't so much discovered as he was, well, in a way, invented.
And our guide for this whole exploration is the incredible work of historian Elaine Pagels. Her book, The Origin of Satan, is this amazing piece of detective work that argues the devil's story is really a story about human conflict.
And this quote, this gets right to the heart of her entire argument. What Pagels is suggesting is that Satan wasn't just some abstract idea. He evolved as a way for the very first Christian communities to make sense of and define themselves against their enemies. He became a kind of supernatural placeholder for their very human opponents. So that brings us to this key concept: demonization. It's an incredibly powerful social tool. You're not just saying your opponents are wrong, you're casting them as agents of a cosmic, absolute, transcendent evil. And what that does is, it solidifies your own group's identity as the good guys. It turns a simple us versus them into an epic good versus evil. So where did this whole practice of demonization really take root? Well, Pagels argues that the perfect storm for Satan's big promotion was first-century Palestine, a time and a place that was just steeped in brutal conflict.
Now, to really grasp where the Gospel's version of Satan comes from, you have to see the text for what it is. The Gospel of Mark, which is the earliest one, isn't just a biography. Pagels makes the case that it's essentially wartime literature. It was written during or right after a completely catastrophic war that changed everything for the Jewish people.
This timeline right here is absolutely crucial. Just look at that gap. Jesus was executed by the Romans around 33 CE, but Mark's Gospel, it wasn't written for almost 40 years. And, most importantly, it was written after that devastating Jewish-Roman war. That conflict and all the trauma that came with it just hangs over every single word of the story. The writers are looking back at the life of Jesus through the lens of that cataclysm. Okay, so keeping that wartime context in mind, let's take a look at how the Gospel of Mark actually portrays Jesus' enemies, because this is where Pagels' theory really clicks into place. Okay, get this. It's fascinating. On the left, you have the historical Pontius Pilate, the guy we know about from other writers at the time. He was a brutal, ruthless Roman governor, known for being cruel and executing people without even giving them a trial. But then look at the Pilate in Mark's Gospel. He's portrayed as this weak, wishy-washy guy who's practically begging the crowd to spare Jesus. He seems less like a vicious tyrant and more like a bureaucrat who's getting pushed around. So why the huge difference? Well, the narrative makes a very strategic choice here. It systematically shifts the blame. Instead of focusing on the Romans, the guys with the actual armies and the power to execute people, Mark's story zooms in on the conflict within the Jewish community itself, between Jesus and the temple priests. The Roman role gets downplayed, and the Jewish leadership gets cast as the real villains who made the crucifixion happen. And the result of that reframing is absolutely profound. Think about it. This story could have been a patriotic tale about a Jewish holy man murdered by the hated Roman occupiers. But instead, it becomes a story about internal division, a story of a prophet being rejected by the leaders of his own community. And that is the fertile ground where the demonization of your own neighbors can really begin to grow. This narrative strategy, which was born out of a very specific, painful historical moment, would go on to have a legacy that has echoed for 2,000 years, and it's often been a very tragic one. And here, Pagels just lays out the stakes in the plainest terms possible. This technique, turning your human opponents into cosmic evil, is incredibly effective at uniting a group. It makes everything seem black and white. But that same move has a terrifyingly dark side, because it can provide a divine justification for hatred and even violence on a massive scale. So this is the ultimate takeaway. The story of Satan's origin isn't just a piece of ancient history. It's about the creation of a template, a powerful and frankly dangerous way of seeing the world. It's a way to take any human conflict, any us versus them, and blow it up into a holy war, a cosmic battle between God and the devil. Which brings us to a final, pretty thought-provoking question, doesn't it? If the figure of Satan is a way to cast our enemies as the embodiment of absolute evil, who plays that role for us today? Who do we turn into Satan in our own social and political conflicts? That's a question really worth thinking about.